Father, we thank you for this, your Shabbat. Father, again, we thank you for the privilege of sitting at your feet. Father, I thank you for this family that we can just come and we can gather, Father, and we can relax. Father, we just thank you for the word that you've prepared for us today. Father, we pray that Ruach HaKodesh would flow through us, that we would hear you, Father, that we would understand you, Father, that you would transform our minds, our hearts, Father, so that we could just better understand you, better live out your word. And Father, that we just pray that as we study and we open up this text, Father, that it's not just head knowledge, Father, but it would be lives transformed. We give you glory. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. Okay, dokie. So, 2 weeks of homework in the making. You have... we didn't get to 18 last time. Because we did the slight recap of 15 that took most of the session. So Exodus 18 you should be well versed with, yes? Alright, so what did we remember from 17?
What did we give water from the rock?
Water from... and what?
And the Amalekites defeated.
And the battle with the Amalekites, right? So we went from, follow your pattern, a redemption story, a Passover, through the Red Sea, from the Red Sea to what? 3 days later we found ourselves where? First Mara, then Elim, then we had to deal with food, with the manna, and then we dealt with water from the rock and the Amalekites. Right, are we missing anything? Was there a birdie involved in any one of those stories? A bird.
Oh, the quail.
Yes, there was the quail that came in with the manna. Yeah, we're not up to Elijah just yet. Right. We need to just continue the pattern. Remember, first this is gonna be a redemptive story leading up to a point. Number one. Number two, when we celebrate Passover later this year and we start to count the Omer. The events of the Omer are what we're recounting every time we start from the Red Sea. Alright, so during that period of 7 weeks to get to the 50th day, where God says count from first fruits to the 50th day. He wants you to remember that Passover is the beginning. The Omer, or these 7 weeks, are linking us to the event at Pentecost that we're going to get to. That's a Mount Sinai reality. Okay, so when he says remember the Omer, it's the same as remember the Passover. Remember what I did, remember what I'm going to do. Are you with me? Okay, so with coming in after we defeat the Amalekites, we teach Joshua and the people of Israel a valuable lesson. The battles are fought on two fronts in a sense, or what you see in the physical is because what they're interceding or what God is allowing to happen from the spiritual aspect. Okay, don't think of it being your own strength that you're gonna win. We go to chapter 18, verse 1. Now Yitro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard all about what God had done for Moshe and for all Israel, his people. How Adonai had brought Israel out of Egypt, after Moses had sent away his wife Zipporah and her 2 sons. Yitro...
There's the bird.
Hmm? Zipporah. Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, had taken them back and named one of the sons Gershom, as in a foreign year, for Moses had said, I've been a foreigner in a foreign land. And the name of the other one was Eleazar, my God helps, because the God of my father helped me by rescuing me from Pharaoh's sword. Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, brought Moshe's son and wife to him in the desert where he was encamped at the mountain of God. He sent word to Moshe, I, your father-in-law Yitro, am coming to you with your wife and her sons. All right, do you guys have any other translation there for his name? Jethro is Jethro is Jethro.
Yes.
All right.
Known by a few things
Somewhere
there.
his name changes.
Look on your phone just to check the interlinear here in Exodus 18. I want to show them in the word. All right. So we're gonna see something interesting with the name that comes in. You guys can mark down so long for me. Exodus 4 verse 18. Numbers 10 verse 29. And Exodus 18. So Exodus 4 verse 18, Numbers 10 verse 29, and Exodus 18.
Numbers.
Numbers 10 verse 29.
What's the third one?
Exodus 18.
Oh, okay.
Right. All right, so we get introduced to Jethro, the priest of Midian. All right, so remember what that means. This is a man who separated himself, part of the Midianite kingdom. Some people believe that he was an idolater and then he left sort of ranks, and that's why when Zipporah and them went out to water the flocks, they were a little bit poked and prodded by the other shepherds that were there. Either way, we have this understanding that, again, this guy is a priest of Midian. All right? And we're going to see something quite interesting in his testimony and the way he brings this across.
You can read his name.
Yeah.
It's 3503.
What did I have it as?
Wow. You know what you're looking for.
What am I looking for?
I don't know.
You know you're not looking for the wife because
No, you're...
It's actually got another
name. Ruel.
I'll find it. Yeah.
It's not just Ruel.
And
But you don't
another
have
one.
that full name.
It's Yeter.
Yeah.
Think twice before we.
Jethro and
So what you will have is we have a rabbinic list of names. One is Yeter, Y-E-T-E-R. The other one is Jethro. And then in Numbers 4 verse 29, he is listed as Hobab. H-O-B-A-B.
I've missed everything there.
Numbers 429.
No, Numbers
I
10.
had 1029.
Yeah, 1029.
Okay.
That's Hobab. Okay?
Okay.
Tell you what, take a moment, go and look it up.
I've got Ruel. The son of Ruel.
Is part of. There's a list of
I saw it.
rabbinic names that pop up. Reuel, Yether, Yeter, Jethro, Hobab, Heber, I think it's Keni and Putiel. All right, now we've got to stop and we've got to sort of ask ourselves the question, why does his name change? What's interesting about the Exodus 4 versus the Exodus 18 reality is that when you look at what is added to the name, you have Yeter and then you have Yetro. So there's a vav that gets added in.
So
Right.
Exodus 4:18 Yitro.
Check. Don't believe me.
Wow, no.
Exodus 4
Mine
verse
just says
18.
Jethro.
Jethro and Jethro.
No, because I have
You have the English one. All right, homework for next week.
Yeah, mine says just Jethro.
I want you to look up the different names that he gives Jethro.
The second one is
Hobab.
We've mentioned it before.
Bab.
Okay? Hobab. Again, you're going to get a lot of tradition that comes into it.
Hobab.
Exodus
Is that
18.
what you said? Hobab. Or Hovav.
Well,
Huh?
it depends on the translation, right? If you're going to go from an English version.
Yeah, Hovav.
Numbers 10 verse 29, Exodus 18 and Exodus 4 are going to give you 3 different realities. And I want you to go look at what was added and why. Okay? For now, it becomes a reality of what is God trying to teach you about this Omer period or what's going to happen. Jethro hears about what?
About the things that God has done for Israel.
Right, so it becomes about testimony. What does he respond in doing? What does he do with that testimony?
Recurs to Moses.
Right, and why is that important? Who does he bring with him?
Moses' wives and wife.
Yeah, wife and kids. So what does that talk to you about?
Family.
Reconciliation. Right, so the time of the Omer, or this picture, is that we're talking about through testimony and what God is your life, God does in your life, brings reunification or reconciliation. Okay? So, Moses is sitting at Mount Sinai, basically. He sends him a message and he says, here I'm coming to you with your sons and your wife. Verse 7 says, Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, prostrated himself and kissed him. He bows. Now you're dealing with a guy who just stood up in front of the biggest superpower in the world at that time, and yet he is still humble enough to honor his father-in-law. Okay? He says, then after inquiring of each other's welfare, they entered the tent. Moses told his father-in-law all that Adonai had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and all the hardships they had suffered while traveling, and how Adonai had rescued them. Yitro rejoiced over all the good that Adonai had done for Israel by rescuing them from the Egyptians. Listen to the response, verse 10. Yitro says, blessed be Adonai, who has rescued you from the Egyptians and from Pharaoh, who has rescued the people from the harsh hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that Adonai is greater than all the other gods, because he rescued those who were treated so arrogantly or harshly. So look at the process that Yitro or Jethro is going through. You have a son-in-law. He was an Egyptian. He comes in, helps the family. You bring him into your house. He's there for 40 years. Then he starts talking about a burning bush and how he has to leave. Leaves his, he starts this journey somewhere in between. Zipporah and them get, separated. Remember there was a process where she had to circumcise his children? Right? And then Moses goes on, he confronts him, maybe in the back of his mind, I don't know if I'm going to survive this. And as we go through this process, there becomes this, I see what God is doing, I see what God is doing, I see what God is doing, I see what God is doing. Are we going to see Moses again? I don't know. Can you imagine being the father trying to comfort his daughter and your grandchildren through this process? We just got to see what happens. So, he goes in, and now because of that, and that testimony, he starts to bless Adonai. Notice he's still listed as a priest of Midian. Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to share a meal before God with Moses' father-in-law. I believe through this testimony of what has done, we often look at how he deals with Egypt. But what you also have to see here is because of that testimony, a priest of Midian has now become a believer. Because of what my God has done, I now understand. He stands back and he's looking at this reality, and Jethro goes, I want to worship him too. His identity so far has been a priest of Midian. Now what? Leave everything else behind. I now know that he is more powerful than any other God. I know that he answers prayers. I know that he rescues. Once God becomes real, because of what he's done for you, he has rescued you. He has dealt with the other gods. How is there any other way now forward? Can I go back to the way things were, or am I going to really just look at this reality and go, he's real, now what? And it might be the testimony in your life. You might be the one sitting there facing the battle. You might be at the front line being in slavery, going through bondage in a whole literal sense, and then someone who knows you all of a sudden sees this whole process that comes out and go, because of what God did in your life, I now know I want to worship him. They might not have to go through the battle you go through. Did you ever think that was a possibility for some of the things we face? You go through difficulty and then you see all of a sudden, this person, he prayed, this is what happens. This God answered his prayer. How can I deny it? I saw it with my own hands and with my own eyes. This was a testimony that came out of them, and now all of a sudden, that gives me the spark of faith to know that this is real. We cannot get so stuck in our going through our refining moment or going through our process that God is busy dealing with us of, and we're not focusing on the fullness of how far that testimony is going to reach. The following day, Moses sat to settle disputes for the people. While the people stood around, Moses from morning until evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing to the people, he said, did you guys have for the people there or to the people?
For the people.
Two.
I want you to think about it. So in his mind, he's serving, sitting down, settling disputes. From morning till evening, they're coming up to him with, what do we do about this? What do we do about this? What do we do about this? What does Moses think he's doing? Helping or hindering?
Oh, he thinks he's doing right.
He thinks he's helping. He's serving the people. Yes, this is difficult, hard labor. You're sitting there listening to disputes, asking God what to do, and giving instructions, right? But look at the wisdom of Jethro. He said, why do you sit there alone with all the people standing around you from morning until evening? Moses answered his father-in-law, it's because the people have come to me seeking God's guidance. Whenever they have a dispute, it comes to me. I judge between one person and the other, and I explain to them God's laws and teachings. Notice we haven't hit Sinai yet.
Yeah. I'm like, where do you get all of this from the burning bush? I mean, really, the right above a practicing priest.
Yeah. You see
Was it a long conversation?
it might have been.
Might have been.
Days.
The burning bush.
Yeah.
That's all time, yeah, I mean, yeah.
So like when you happen at
How
Mara.
Hello, dude. It was, come sit down. Talk to me.
Well, look, you still said, remember at Mara it said that God gave them rulings and teachings for life.
Yeah.
So it might have been enough that he gave enough of that to see them through to Sinai, and from there they would carry on the lesson. Okay? So he comes up and he says, all right, well, I'm looking at what God's telling me. Or maybe he's praying in that moment and God's saying, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. And they start giving you the stipulations. Verse 17 says, Moses' father-in-law said to him, what you're doing isn't good. You will certainly wear yourself out, not only yourself, but these people here with you as well. It's too much for you. You can't do it alone by yourself. Well, there's a point here when your intent is to help, but you're actually not only helping, you're now hindering. If you are continually there to sort out everybody else's problems, they will learn to rely on you and not to rely on God, number one. Number two, if you are the one sitting there and the only one that can talk to, if I have to sit there for 8 hours to get an answer,
Stand.
and I'm going to go, eventually when I get there, it's no. What does God want me to do? And now this is going to become, you're going to be worn out, you're going to get frustrated, you're going to start giving of yourself in a sense, and they are not going to be happy to hear anything you have to say because they've been standing here for the last how long? Right? There is a process that we need to realize that, again, what this becomes is not a one-man band. It cannot be.
There were too many people.
If you let's use this fellowship right here. Plate, just focusing on plate. If we just focus on plate, whose responsibility is it to make sure that everybody is taken care of in the group?
Shepherd. Hello.
So you have no responsibility whatsoever to make sure that your neighbor is okay.
No, I'm in charge of my territory. But if you don't give it to me,
What happened to the mitzvah, love your neighbor as you love yourself?
Yeah. That's what I was thinking now. It's each and every person's responsibility.
around you.
So the shepherd's responsibility is to make sure that we stay on track.
Yeah.
It's not my responsibility to make sure everybody's okay. It says, the verse that likes to get thrown around is, what about Christ's law? Love your neighbor as you love yourself. We read in Romans 12 today, bear one another's burdens. Those are also instructions. That's not only for the leadership. We make it a leadership problem because it's easier. Oh, they're going through a hard time. Go sort it out. Oh, they're having this issue. Go sort it out. What's wrong with you?
But I can't interfere.
Yeah, no. I don't have a...
I don't have the authority to interfere.
Those are the excuses that people use to be able to go to it. What authority do you need to be able to go have a cup of coffee and say, listen, I see you struggling with something. Are you okay? If anything, a leader should give you some sort of pattern to follow, but don't give yourself the excuse that it's only about the leadership that have to deal with it. We are instructed. If some of you, if you know of someone doing wrong, what's the process biblically we have to go to according to the New Testament?
Speak to the elders.
No, you go speak to the person.
Yes, that's right.
And then what happens? He says, sis, leave me alone.
Somebody with you.
Then you go fetch another brother and you go and you have that conversation again. And then if they don't listen to you,
Then you slap him.
Before you slap him, and then you stop him.
then you go fetch the leadership.
Oh, okay.
And if they don't listen to the leadership is kind of, if I'm sitting at your table telling you, this is now your third opportunity to make repentance and you have not, the responsibility then becomes, do you want to be here anymore? The leader gets brought into the level of, I'm here to see whether or not you want to hold on to your sin. And that means it's time for you to leave. Or whether you're going to listen to what they're saying and check yourself according to God's text and make it right. Because I'm not having you here continually chasing down your sin being a stumbling block for the people around you. So it's not just a leadership. Oh yeah, no, they're doing. I heard they were doing something on Sabbath, or they're not doing this. Why aren't they doing this? Talk to them.
Can I go out of my own discretion?
As long as what you're correcting, or if it is a correction reality, make sure you're standing on solid ground. One. Number two, if you're gonna go find out if someone's okay, what's wrong with a little bit of compassion? If Auntie Ange doesn't touch base with me, maybe we're running around and we're doing something. Hoopful is going through a trying time. We're focusing on it. Benoni is losing their marbles because of whatever. I'm expecting people to make sure the body works. I can't be at every single place at the same time, and I can't be everything to everybody. That's where you come in. So you have the opportunity, if you know about a situation, God's putting that at your feet, and He says, are you going to deal with it because you love them and you love me, or are you just going to ignore it? What do you think the answer is?
Deal with it.
Exactly. If we're going to operate like family, then we have to go in, and you say if someone here is hurting, if someone is struggling, then it becomes your responsibility as much as mine.
But then it's also on the person who's struggling to also not look at the person who's come and say, but you're not the pastor.
Yes.
Or you're
Who's
not
offended, yeah.
the
Yeah.
elder of the church, so why are you here?
I'm
I
not
want
leaving.
the elder to come and sit opposite.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you
what
have
was-
problem too.
The one story is. But that's the thing, and if the pastor, it's the pastor's responsibility. That, guys, it's not the pastor's responsibility to sit there, be at everybody's beck and call 24/7. Even if you look at it and you took it back to the book of Acts, Peter and them, remember there was this big dispute, and they say the widows of the Gentile nation or the Greeks were being overlooked with their portions. Peter and them didn't go, yo, call a meeting, yeah, we're going to go sort that. He said, elect somebody, make sure that their portion get overlooked, because our job is to make sure that we're in line with God. We need to be focusing on prayer. It's, and I don't think it was sit there to sound mean. It's like there are other people to be able to do that. If you're called to help them in that avenue, then deal with that reality. If we take the reliance off, or if we make the body only work when one person is standing in that gap, you're going to have a big problem when that person leaves. You don't stop gathering because Vince isn't here. You gather because God said you must gather. You don't stop being a family because Auntie Ange gets sent somewhere. We carry on being a family because this is what God expects. Moses, don't think you have to sit here being the be-all and end-all. This is too much for you. Know your limitations. This is exactly, again, this process from Yeshua coming to minister and deal with people in his physical self, and why he sent the Holy Spirit. And he said, it's better for you that he comes. Not like they were going to teach anything different, not that they were going to go through the process. It's just that he can be everywhere at the same time. Yeshua in his physical form could only do this. Now, wouldn't it be amazing if you could tear yourself in like 47 people, and then I could still lead Benoni congregation, be in Hoopful and be here all at the same time? The simple reality is you're not him, so stop trying to take his place. So do not place that emphasis on any leader. Okay? So he goes through the process. He says, look, it's too much for you. You can't do this alone. Verse 19. So listen now to what I have to say. I will give you some advice, and God will be with you. You should represent the people before God, and you should bring their cases to God. You should also teach them laws and teachings and show them how to live their lives and what work they should do. But you should choose from among all the people competent men who are God-fearing. Look at the criteria. God-fearing comes first.
Yeah,
Why?
because they're not people pleasing.
Right. So if I'm actually more concerned about what God thinks about the situation, I'm going to make sure I stick closer to his instruction. Honest, incorruptible. That's for you. Incorruptible to be their leaders. Do you guys have a different translation there?
There's capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens.
Right, so people who are not going to take a bribe. It's not about the money. Oh, so you're the big 5% tithing group. We can talk about how we can work around this little hiccup. We should not be swayed according to other people's bank balance, that they come in and go, oh, well, if we lose that person, we lose 10% of our tithe intake. If I'm God-fearing first, then I don't care how much money you bring into the congregation. If you are going to mess with the reality of what's right and wrong here, I'm going to tell you to leave. It's not he who is rich or brings more money into the kingdom is the one that gets away with more. Right? We have to understand we have a responsibility, but also as a responsibility, we have to make sure that we elect leaders. Now, leadership, Paul will say, leadership is something everyone should aspire to. Has that been on the forefront of anybody's mind at any given time? Why? We're not going to stay this small forever. So what would I expect for those that have been hearing the teaching the longest?
Just
Step up.
Hello.
Daniel, I need a
Smelled it, built it.
Hy was wil saam met jou eet.
Ek kan nie. Ek kan siek word.
Now, what sort of requirements then do I have? If I have to start already thinking about where I fit in, understand that leadership is not only a spiritual gifting, but it is also, I have to fulfill certain criteria. Now, not everybody is called, not everybody is called to leadership. But that does not mean that I get to shirk any sort of responsibility within the body.
Okay.
In that space.
Okay.
You wanted to say something, right?
I think I was thinking about you earn leadership.
Yeah.
You work for it.
When we get to the spot thereof of when God gives us a leadership ideal, he says someone who is in leadership should lead with diligence and zeal. Romans 12. Right? So if we're going to go to that reality, we have to be passionate and we have to be constant. Okay? The amount of faces you guys are pulling is quite interesting. It's like, is that the leadership topic or the grenadilla that's making everybody France?
Come try one, Papa.
No, I'm okay. I still have to.
It'll change your life.
I still have to talk while I'm busy here.
We
Okay.
can chat, no, don't you worry.
So he says you take leaders and you put them in charge of thousands, charge of hundreds, charge of 50s, and charge of 10s. So just because you might have a group of 10 doesn't mean that you're any less. Right?
I'm thinking in the point of if you are walking in your relationship with God as best as you can, you're trying to become more full and complete, and you've been obedient.
Yeah.
You are a leader because there's somebody behind you,
100%.
copying you, following you, and that is your testimony, basically. So whether you like it or not, the one step that you've managed to, by His grace, get correct,
Yeah.
somebody's copying and following you, the example. You happen to be in the front. That makes you a leader. If it's only one.
Yeah.
If it's only your family.
Right.
So that I'm in the leadership of this, that and the other.
Yeah.
First start with the small stuff.
Which is again, it
just happens, you
fits the pattern of discipleship.
Yeah.
How does discipleship in its
Yeah.
fullness fit into that? If I'm supposed to be a copy of Christ and I'm supposed to make disciples, you are fulfilling that role. But God might lift you up to say now, okay, you've done it for a long time now, go and help 10 other people who don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
And that becomes your responsibility. That becomes your opportunity to be able to go, okay, Lord, you're going to have to do this through me.
Yeah.
But it is so. And I mean, guys, I've seen this practically in other congregations. I'll finish a teaching, and before I even leave the area where I'm standing, I'll have 3 or 4 people standing in front of me going, I have a question. And there are another 60 people behind them who thought about coming up and asking a question, but go, oh no, he's busy. I'll spend the next hour answering 4 questions, and the people behind them leave with questions unanswered.
Yeah.
So then it becomes an issue of, no, hang on a second. Go talk to Regan, go talk to Mark, go talk to Billy, go talk to Bruce, go talk to whoever. These guys will be able to help you out. If you still don't get any love or they don't give you an answer satisfactory, then come talk to me. Right? It's to help the body move. Because what happens when we have a question and we don't get an answer?
We're still.
Yeah, and then I'm like, I keep on coming back. I can't really move. And this is a bit of a thing, right? So that time where people go, oh, again, we have to be open to the reality. Sometimes we come in here and we sit down and we go, we're going to be studying Exodus or whatever. But you have something that you have been struggling with for the last 3 months, and you say, can we please deal with this? Can you just give me an answer before we even start? We have to also allow those God interruptions. Some people consider it a nuisance. I see it as God stopping and he says, deal with this so that person can move on. Right?
Maybe one or other way that topic might fit in with something else on the way.
100%. So there were times where we walked in and I opened up and I'd prepared 2 or 3 chapters, and then someone would ask a question and I would close the book and put it down. Guys, we're not talking about this tonight. We're going to deal with that. Are you okay? And we were able then to go through it. We are trying to meet the people's needs. Whether it's 1, whether it's 5, whether it's 10, whether it's hundreds, whether it's thousands, it doesn't matter. Okay. So, in the back of your mind, I don't want you just to think of what my spiritual gifting is. In a sense, remember, discipleship is part of that process. Normally, they will settle the people's disputes. They should bring you the difficult cases, but ordinary matters they should decide themselves. In this way, they will make it easier for you and share the load with you. If you do this, and God is directing you to do it, you will be able to endure, and all these people will arrive at their destination peacefully. We got it resolved. We're good. We can carry on.
Mine says go home satisfied.
You're right. Moshe paid attention to his father-in-law's counsel and did everything he said. Moshe chose competent men from all Israel and made them heads over the people in charge of thousands, hundreds, 50s, and 10s. As a general rule, they settled the people's disputes. The difficult cases they brought to Moses, but every simple matter they decided themselves. Then Moses let his father-in-law leave, and he went off to his own country. Right. So if we had to follow our pattern, with reconciliation comes counsel. How do I get them home with everybody's need attended so that we can go, are you okay? Are you good? Because the next step, God is going to interrupt your program and come down with a big voice, some fire from heaven, and he's going to go, hi, it's me, let's talk. If I'm still grumbling about the oak because his cow stood on my cow, I'm not going to be all that excited about, oh yes, one nation, one law, one God, because I'm going to feel that I've been overlooked.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm going to start to resent my brother standing next to me, and I'm told we're supposed to love your neighbor as you love yourself. So we have to go through this process of being able to look at, okay, where is it where I'm hindering the people, and where is it, or how can I better serve them? Does that make sense? Any questions about 18?
I just want to know that if I've got a question, any of us, I've got a question. Must I first go to you, or must I first go to one of the other family members? And if I think in my mind, I know exactly what everybody's going to say, and I've gone to God several times, and I don't know the answer.
Nice catch. Look, when it comes down to certain things, if it's a basic biblical question, you are more than welcome to ask anybody sitting at the table, as long as what they're saying they can back it up. In the beginning, I prefer that most things come to me, for the simple reality is I want to just be able to set a firm foundation so that teach you guys to be able to test that reality. If you are comfortable and you say, listen, I've always been thinking about this, what does that mean? And we can turn it very quickly into a group discussion. There's nothing wrong with that, because I see that as a learning opportunity for everybody. Right? So if it's a private matter and I'm going, okay, what's this scenario? What's that scenario? You're absolutely 100%. As it stands now, here I am. But when we get to 50, 60, 70,
Here they are. But I think it's also, if you have a certain thing that's bothering you. I can be wrong, but I doubt it. In your heart, God's going to show you who you must talk to about it.
Yes.
And 99.9% you're going to get the answer you want from that specific person, because God's never wrong.
if He's shown you that.
Yeah, if He's showing you that person.
On the grounds of being getting information, learning, to when we get to that point, I will then be through all those
Yeah.
process
Yeah.
things to be able to say, okay, if somebody goes to you with that specific question, you know, okay, go to her or go to him, because
Yeah, and it might not just be 100% life experience. Yeah, it might be, hey, listen, I've never cleaned out my house for Passover. What do I do?
yeah,
Your third Passover, you're gonna go.
I
Hey,
was
listen.
really thinking, I want to ask Tanya, I just want to make sure this time I don't find something a week later in my cupboard. You're not supposed to be. Please give me the list again.
Well, welcome to the wonderful learning curves that you go through. What happens if you go, listen, I really don't understand this Yom Kippur thing? If by the third time we go through Yom Kippur, you should be like, okay, what is it you don't understand? And then we kind of go through this whole process. You should be able to then start to give counsel. Okay? We good? Right. Exodus 19. Okay? Build up. In the third month, so roughly how many days are we going to say? From the time of leaving to
In the third 3 months.
in the third month. Remember, we're going to pick 50 days from first fruits, right? Okay. Says, in the third month, the people of Israel had left in the land of Egypt in the same day they came to. So they left in the first month.
Yes, so it's a third month.
Yes. So that 50 days is now leading us to Shavuot. So if you had to track from the time of Passover, 50 days is going to be in the third month.
Yes, sorry.
Right. They had left the land of Egypt the same day they came to Sinai Desert. After setting out from Rephidim and arriving at the Sinai Desert, they set up camp in the desert there in front of the mountains of Israel. They set up camp. Moses went up to God, and Adonai called him from the mountains. Here is what you are to say to the household of Jacob and to the people of Israel. Now, again, reminder, why does he use Jacob and Israel as terms?
Why does he use
The term Jacob and Israel. Okay, so
Is it maybe it's to do
before and
with
after?
the separation?
separation of what?
When Jacob had to go one way, he decided to stay at home. Oh my, that's just not making any sense now. Okay.
If we had to, the separation with Jacob happened with Jacob and Esau.
Yeah.
Esau went and took out Mount Seir in Edom. It's not part of this territory at all. Completely different lineage. Right? So if he was saying, now in Hebrew sometimes you will see two words, exactly the same words, next to each other. Maher, maher. Le'at, le'at. They will use the same phrase. That's to enforce what they're saying twice. But this is not that. He says Yaakov and Israel. So he makes a distinction. Now, people will look at it and then they will go, Jacob and Israel is the same guy. Right? The man called Jacob got his name changed to Israel. Right? So we're saying it's the same thing. But if it is the same thing, why does he say to the household of Yaakov and to the people of Israel? Some people will say it's reiteration. I'm thinking that it is because there are two different people groups sitting at this mountain. Number one, it is the seed of Jacob that was part of the covenant from Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. It's a covenant reality. Israel seems to be, and the New Testament backs us up, Paul says we are grafted into the household of Israel. He doesn't make a distinction between Jew and Gentile there. I think he understands what's going on here. Is that there was a mixed multitude that left Egypt as well. And now they're sitting at the mountain. So what would happen if you were sitting over there? We're a couple of lost South Africans who saw what God did to the Egyptians. We were also slaves there and we left, or perhaps we were brought there and we stayed there for a while, and now we've left our lives behind because we saw the one and only God. And now this is where we are. And he goes, and to the house of Jacob. That's not us. But by saying Israel, I think he reaffirms a spiritual reality. Okay? Is there a picture in Torah that will reaffirm that? And the answer is yes. When Jacob was focusing mainly on a physicality or his physical lineage, he was referred to as Yaakov. When he started operating a spiritual, more spiritually minded, he was called Israel. Abram to Avraham never went back. Isaac stayed the same. Jacob, Israel, Jacob, Israel, Jacob, Israel. Bounces in between two, I think, the flesh and the spirit, and whatever he wants to emphasize at that point. Right? When we look at the way he struggled with Joseph being taken from him, Jacob was not one of the ones. Yes, he cried out to God, but it was generally a term where he was referred to more as Jacob. Right? And when he found out Joseph was alive, he goes up and he makes an offering. And what did we read? And Israel made an offering to God. It's that relationship now that has been restored. Oh, you actually protected him, you kept him safe. Makes sense? So God brings in here for me a Jew and Gentile reality, or a physical house and a spiritual one. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if, this is an important if. If means you have a choice to make. The choice is yours. If you will pay careful attention to what I say and keep my covenant. If. Then you will be my own treasure, or a peculiar treasure from among all the peoples, For all the earth is mine, and you will be a kingdom of Kohanim, a kingdom of priests for me, a nation set apart. These are the words you are to speak to the people of Israel. So, he leads them up, he says, come up, Ya Moshe, and then he says, I've got a physical group and I've got a spiritual group. And he says, I want to ask you something. But before he does, he uses some extremely beautiful poetic language. You have seen how I have carried you on the wings of eagles, and I've brought you unto myself. Now, if we were probably ancient Galileans, you would have maybe looked at this verse slightly differently. When the groom comes and fetches the bride, in many cases they would pick her up in a litter and carry her towards the groom. So this idea of carrying and bringing towards you is the idea of a marriage being fulfilled, right? Listen to what God is saying. I have lifted you up on the wings of eagles and I've brought you to myself. If you say I do, if you say yes, then you. So before we get married, we have to exchange vows. There's promises. If you say yes, then you become a segula, a peculiar treasure. Because of that, you will be a kingdom of priests. Okay? Now again, when we think of treasure, what do you think of?
Chest full of gold.
Right. Most of us have this image of pirate bounty stuck in our head, right? It's treasure, it's diamonds, it's jewels, it's all this stuff. But look at what he says. You will become my peculiar treasure. For all the earth is mine. I can create diamonds and gold and rubies and sapphires and precious stones and gems. God can create that at a word. He did. And he doesn't say, this is what you are to me. He says, you will be my peculiar treasure. He doesn't want gold and gems and stuff. We make this relationship with him all about what I can get from him, money-wise. And to do that, I have to give him money-wise. And we use it as a Ponzi scheme. He's looking at the heart of the people and he says, if you would just be mine, you will become my special treasure. Does this not echo Yeshua saying the kingdom of heaven is like someone who found a treasure? And he sold up everything he had just so that he could go and get it. Or he found something precious and he hid it in this plot of land. This is the way the Father sees you, and it's the way we should see him. We're the one who found the treasure. He sees the treasure in us. If we do what? What is the stipulation? Pay attention and keep the covenant. If I pay attention to his mitzvot, if I keep the covenant, I'm actively part in my vows here. These are the stipulations for me to become a peculiar treasure and the kingdom of priests. My part is to choose it, to pay attention to it, to hold fast to it. His part, you're mine. Do you not see how precious and beautiful you are to me? Do you not understand whose house you represent? We've spoken about this before. Remember, to be a kingdom of priests, when the book of Leviticus has not yet been given, you cannot apply the same logic they have. This isn't about offerings just yet. What does a kingdom of priests do?
Attend to the king.
Represent the king. An Egyptian mindset showed me that if I wanted to understand your God, I would just look at the priest. The priest's job was to reflect that deity perfectly so that I would understand the deity. It had nothing to do with the person standing in front of me. His sole function or her sole function was to represent the person they belonged to. This is the same reality as discipleship. Your job as a disciple is to reflect your rabbi. I care very little, and I'm going to say this in love, about your opinion. I care very little about your interpretation. Because if you do your job right, I won't hear your opinion or your interpretation. I will hear your rabbi speaking through you. In the same way, if I am his bride, I will reflect his likes, his dislikes, his joys, his frustrations. I know him. So when people see you, you peculiar treasure, you kingdom of priests, are you standing there? Are we actively reflecting our beloved? Remember when you were teaching your kids, maybe, or maybe when we went to go play at people's places and whatever, and then they tell you things like, my parents always had that saying, said, would you jump, if we were caught jumping on the furniture or our friends were jumping on our furniture, they said, they would ask them, it's like, would you do that in your parents' house? No. Why wouldn't they? But, because it's not allowed to. Why? Because my dad doesn't like it. Why? Because I'm destroying the furniture. You start to identify what the parents allow, and that filters down to the kids, right? For you as a bride, or even if we were to just take it in a marriage reality, everything I say and do affects how we are seen as a couple. Everything my wife does reflects me. Everything I do reflects her. Everything my kids do reflect us. And that goes further. If we had to take this from a congregational point of view, everything you say and do reflects me.
To a point where you actually experience godly.
Well, it's
Buddha, what is Buddha? Anger, godly anger. Because
yeah, part of, you can, because there are certain things that God gets angry about, right? And there's injustice and brokenness and hurt and things that he's also very sad about. Is that the same for our reality? Now, if we can understand it on a very basic form, that what we do matters because our God is being judged because of what we do and say. Oh, so this is Christianity. No thanks. I don't want any part of it. And that might be because you're having a bad day and you're having a bit of a grump and a groan and whatever the case may be. And they go, oh, okay, if this is what you're telling me your God says is cool, then no thanks. How many people spurn Christianity? They walk away from Christ because of the misrepresentation of his people. How much more so for us who understand the Torah truth as well as have the Ruach HaKodesh with the example of Christ? This is a big thing. It's something that we have to go, okay, remember who you represent, because this isn't just a surname reality. This is an eternal one. You just happen to be betrothed to a king, which means you're royalty. You represent not only the king, but his entire kingdom. This is who you are, and that what we say, what we do, how we submit, how we carry our cross, how we operate with our spiritual gifts, whatever the scenario becomes a reflection of your God, your beloved. And if we do it right, we're the peculiar treasure. We are the beauty that he keeps, that he looks at you with joy and he goes, can you not look at this treasure that I have? He's setting up these covenants that led up to this moment, where as individuals from Abraham through Isaac, through Jacob, through his seed has led up to a moment of a nation. And he says, we got here because I walked with Abraham. We got you because I walked with Isaac. We got you because I walked with Yaakov. You got rescued because of those promises, and now you stand up before me with a choice to make. Will you be mine? Now the immediate answer is, if you love him, remember, he set you free, he mikvahed you. You came out, so you got to the place now where you are free to make a choice. Will I do this? Will I agree? Will I hold fast? Will I represent? Let's see what they say. Moses came, summoned the leaders of the people, and presented them with all the words which Adonai had ordered him to say. All the people answered as one, everything Adonai has said we will do. So the leaders go back, they say, listen, this is the question, are we in as a nation? They say everything. Moses reported the words of the people to Adonai. Isn't that funny? God's sitting there listening to the whole conversation. He's got Moses running up and down a mountain. You know what they said. What did they say? Moses needed to be able to hold them to account as well. Adonai said to Moses, see, I am coming to you in a thick cloud, so that the people will be able to hear when I speak with you, and also to trust in you forever. Moses had told Adonai what the people have said, so Adonai said to Moses, go to the people today and tomorrow, separate them for me by having them wash their clothing and prepare the third day. Third day reality should be telling you about. Right. Now there's an interesting study if you play this game. Every time a third day is mentioned, you make a really long list of those and you see what the third day represents to God. For on the third day, Adonai will come down on Mount Sinai before the eyes of all the people. You are to set limits for the people all around them and say, be careful not to go up to the mountain or even touch its base. Whoever touches the base, whoever touches the mountain will surely be put to death. No hand is to touch him, for he must be stoned or shot by arrows. Neither animal nor human will be allowed to live. When the shofar sounds, they may go up the mountain. So first he says, wash your clothing, get ready. And then he says, don't even think about coming up here because that's the point where you die. Now, I don't know about you. 1 second I'm a peculiar treasure. The next second he's telling me I'm going to get shot with arrows. Which one is it?
Do I need to run or can I come?
What is he trying to tell us?
Specific.
Can you play?
You are my beloved. Go to your room. There's a place where God's holiness and sanctity cannot be breached. Not in this place, not in that form, not right now. They barely know him. Okay, there are a moment where there's still a bit of separation. Even Moses couldn't experience the fullness of God. Right, and he's having that whole conversation. We know the thing, you should show me your face. And he goes, mm-mm. And I thought, and then at other places we use the poetic language of they spoke face to face. It's like there was this level of intimacy, but you cannot still experience the fullness in your broken form. So when God descends into a place, he talks to you about, take off your sandals. This is holy ground. Don't think you can just rush up here. When you come into the presence of the king, I want you to think of Esther for a second. Right? Remember what I said. She took her life in her hands and she went in on the third day. And it was through the favor of the king when he reached out and he was able to say, you are allowed to come into my presence. God is here. He's put his boundary in place and he says, let's just focus on our betrothal first. Moses went down from the mountain to the people and separated the people for God, and they washed their clothing. He said to the people, prepare for the third day. Don't approach a woman. Okay? Why am I not allowed to approach a woman? Why am I washing my clothes? Is God really worried about whether I'm covered in dust? He is. The physical reflects the spiritual. So teach to me about washing of clothes.
That what's not supposed to be in your heart to say bye-bye and kick it out. Shoo, shoo.
Yeah, remember if you get stuck with any of this stuff, just think about Yeshua. He's commented on one way or another, form or another. He says you whitewash tomb, or you whitewash wall. Or you for you Pharisees, you clean the outside of the cup, but on the inside,
Still dirty.
you're so busy washing your hands, but the fraud is inside. You see that same sort of mentality here. Yeshua is a rabbi, he's busy repeating the same things. So he's like, listen, if you're busy washing your clothes, remember before you stand before a king, but oh boy, you better check your heart condition. And as you come in and he says, all right, well, we got that part done, don't go near a woman. Now remember, Leviticus has not yet been given. So what truth is your God trying to teach you?
Do not trust Eve, she eats that.
Oh, the woman outside the camp. No, that's not what he's trying to teach you.
Maybe to focus on him.
Okay,
Divided attention.
could be. Is that the best we got?
Hoekom het die mense nie naby die vrou gegaan het toe hulle by 'n man sny was nie?
Dit is goed nie. The one thing.
Wow, everybody unclean at the same time?
No. No, I don't know. I just got the feeling it's just a woman. I was standing at the bottom of the mountain.
It's just a woman.
When you said, I just got the feeling.
See what I told you? Trust Eve, she eats apple.
It's just a woman.
Did she give the answer?
No. The simple reality is, the simple reality is that remember he's preparing a people and he's also changing their way they think. So if I'm going into a Canaanite reality where they teach me worship equals pants optional realities.
Worship equals pants.
Optional.
No!
And we have a nice big round altar and the high priest and the priestess come in the middle of the door and they worship right there smack bang, and once they start, everybody joins. You are allowed to grab whomever or whatever.
No.
That's not how it works.
That's how it did.
Oh.
And we will say,
Jeez.
this is how we worship our God. I'm not even making this up. This is documented.
Sheesh.
To the point that when spring happened, they believe in the Canaanite reality that their God actually went into the earth where it was warmer during winter, but when we wanted good harvest in spring, we would have to get him excited in that sense. So how do we get him excited? We get excited, then he would grab his girlfriend, the God's girlfriend, and they would procreate and we would have flowers.
No.
Right.
Hy mense het regtig net van die bus afgeval.
Weird body.
This is what you're dealing with. So what does God start to institute here? He says, you're not going to confuse worship, the way they worship, and me in that reality. So I want you guys to stay focused. I want you guys to understand that this is how we're going to do this. Remember, these being intimate in the bounds of marriage, Paul will say this is pure. Or you can make it something that it's not. God said, He made it this way. You, husband, wife, it's a good thing. And don't confuse worship and a good thing. This is an intimacy thing. And we have different scripts because back in antiquity, ancient times, many of the ways of worship involved fornication. This is why Leviticus, 18? I think it is, will give you a whole list of chapters about what you're not allowed to do, and that includes 2 animals and so on. And I never understood why he would have to actually write that down up until the point I understood about Egyptian and Canaanite culture. This was normal. So he creates a separation. Remember, I have to remap your ideas of what a God is. I have to show you from the beginning what is right and what is wrong. I need to show you not only that I can heal you, or that I want to heal you, or that I want to save you. I want to teach you, again, you've been slaves for 400 years. I want to show you to live covenant. I want to show you what it looks like when God hears you. I want to show you redemption. I want to show you. And they're showing all these attributes of himself. So when he says, when I come down to you, let's not get confused. I believe this is what he's alluding to. Okay? So he goes, on the morning on the third day, there was thunder, lightning, and thick cloud on the mountain. Then a shofar blast sounded so loudly that all the people in the camp trembled. Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God. They stood at the base of the mountain. Mount Sinai was enveloped with smoke because Adonai descended onto it as fire. So listen carefully to the imagery. We have fire, we have a great noise, we have smoke or cloud. Its smoke went up like the smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain shook violently. At the sound of the shofar grew louder and louder. Moses spoke, and God answered him with a voice. Adonai came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain. Then Adonai called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. Let me remind you, Moses is 80 odd years old, and he's climbing up and down the mountain. We had this idea, or at least I had this idea, that he went up once and he got the 10 Commandments and then he came back down and that was it. He's already climbed up twice now. Go up, tell them what to do. Comes back down, tells them what to do. He goes back up. This is what's going to happen. And he goes back down and he goes and does it. And then he says, come up. This coming up and down the mountain scenario, why is that important?
Keeps him humble.
Keeps him fit. Let me give you a little inkling. There's a traditional site in Egypt that they call St. Catherine's Monastery. Now, this is not the place where it happened, but St. Catherine's Monastery has over 1,000 steps to get to the top. They say the hike takes about 2.5 hours.
1,000 steps.
Moses,
During time, it was only 500.
Moses, this is not a, I'm just going to run up the little copy scenario. Now, spiritual lesson. There are going to be times when you are called up to the mountaintop. And you're going to be there and you're going to have a moment with God and all the rest of it. And then he's going to tell you to leave. And you're not going to want to leave. But you have to leave because the people at the base of the mountain need to know what you just experienced. And then he might call you back up. Okay? Those mountaintop moments are those that are going to really keep you going, those intimate moments. But there are also, in the midst of that coming back down to where everybody else is, it's for them, not for you. They need to hear what you've received, okay? Verse 21, Adonai said to Moses, go down and warn the people not to force their way through to Adonai to see him. If they do, many of them will perish. Even the Kohanim who are allowed to approach Adonai must keep themselves holy, otherwise Adonai will break out against them. Moses said to Adonai, the people can't come up and can't come up to Mount Sinai because you ordered us to set limits around the mountain and separate it. But Adonai answered him, go, get down, then come back up. And Aaron with you, but don't let the Kohanim and the people force their way through to come up to Adonai, or he will break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and told them, up, down, get ready. Eventually, we get to this reality. I find it interesting that he says, go get down, and he's going to use that same sort of term when they're busy with the golden calf. They were obviously plotting something to come up to the mountain in the midst of themselves. We go from here into Ten Commandments. Okay? This is something you are fairly familiar with. We're going to address a couple of points and then I'm going to give you some homework. Okay?
Some more homework.
Yeah.
Okay, you're making sure this week is a good.
You have like 6 days to prepare. You're fine. Then God said these words. I am Yud-He Vav-He, your God, who brought you up in the land of Egypt out of the abode of slavery. The first commandment starts with your redemptive plan. Remember, Israel and Yaakov. I'm the one who set you free. It's true for both groups of people. Every believer today starts off with that first commandment. I am the Lord your God who set you out of slavery. I took you out of your bondage. Right? You are to have no other gods before me. Alright? You are not to make for yourselves a carved image of any kind of representation of anything in the heaven above or on earth beneath or the water below the shoreline. You are not to bow down to them or serve them, for I, Adonai, your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of their parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. But displaying grace to the thousandth generation to those who love me and keep my commandments. Loving God and keeping His commandments is not a New Testament concept. Now, many people talk about generational curses. They will use this verse to say this is what generational curses is. We've spoken about this before, yes? Okay. If we look at the context of what he's saying, for this type of curse to take hold, where God punishes the children of the parents for those who hate Him, what is the greater context of the second commandment? Idolatry. Can it apply for one believer to the next?
Depends on if you're going to keep idols as just graven images or if you're going to keep idols as money and fame and
Remember, the context is
yes,
hating God.
yeah.
So if that is going to make me hate God, that means I'm going to walk away from the instruction. That means my children will feel the effect of my decision from generation to generation. It's simple reality. You were not, what's the word, separated, or you were not immune to the effects of your parents' decisions. It had nothing to do with you and your relationship with God. You simply felt the consequences of broken people making bad choices. Now, what happens if that brokenness went to the point of hating God? Your pathway to get back to God just got a lot more difficult. Your reality got a lot more difficult. People who follow, we have a tendency to follow the pattern of what we've been exposed to. This is our norm. Now, if I become a believer and the old passes away, am I going to repeat that same cycle?
No.
I shouldn't, because I've surrendered my entirety of my life and now I am making something new. If I look at the pattern in the book of Kings, one king sets up idols, worships other gods, forgets about God. He dies. God takes him out. His son comes into power. Does God punish the king who brings restoration? Why not? It says here that he will be punished to the third and fourth generation.
Having an We
Everyone.
had situations where the king itself wasn't punished, but he says that your children will see.
Will feel
when-
what?
when is the one that-
Will
that
feel the
they-
effects of the choices, or will be punished because of the choices?
Uh,
One involves me, and one is just a general effect because of other people's sin. It's the same as if I decide, God forbid, to climb in a car and drive like a hooligan and have 47 tequilas while I do, and I bump into another car. One is me, or other one is me driving home in my own reality, and then that person affects me. Now, when we talk about generational curses, it is more the case of that is a cause and effect that affects me because of something someone else did. It's direct line to the point that we've developed a theology that I have to cut off the generational curse using whatever formula they've developed so that now I can have a clean start. Yeshua's blood is that clean start.
where was that? There's that king that Father says that you won't see the destruction in your day, but your children
Hezekiah.
will. Is it Hezekiah?
But then again, that was mercy on Hezekiah, but yet the consequences of what he did was still going to come to fruition. Now, that wasn't a generational curse in the sense of he was punishing the children. It was a prophecy of what was going to happen. So we confuse the different bounds of things, and now we start to create theologies based on a single verse, and then we say this is your reality. Oh, you're sick or you're having a hard time. It's because your father was a Freemason. If we apply that logic to Paul, or what about some of the Greek believers? What about Titus and Timothy? Timothy's father was a Greek. Why are we not nullifying his generational curses? His father was an idolater. Why did God single him out, make sure that he was circumcised, brought into covenant, and then used mightily in the early church? Why don't we look at him and we go, surely his parents were, his father definitely was involved in idolatry and paganism, so why then is Timothy excluded from this reality? Unless the reality is shifted to the point where this curse that we're talking about falls on Christ and then it is dealt with. If you make teshuvah and you love God and you keep His commandments, what is going to be the fruit thereof? The blessing until the 1,000th generation. We might be in the midst of that because someone obeyed and Father, please look after my descendants. And somehow, through all of the megalmus, God goes, someone was praying for you a long time ago. I'm here to answer that. These were guys who were slaves for 400 years sitting over there going, where's God, where's God, where's God, was it a generational curse that got them into slavery? No, it was part of God's plan. And when God pitched up and He goes, hey, I told you this was going to happen, but now let me deal with these people. Are we now saying that they made teshuvah and therefore they deserve to be being brought out? No, they didn't make teshuvah. They just cried out because they didn't like the bondage. Are you starting to see the conundrum we have when I apply a certain rule of thumb and I make it applicable to everything? God is the one who's saying, if you're going to hate me and you're going to teach your children to hate me and you're going to pursue that, there's going to be damage down the line. If you love me, Scripture says, if you train up a child, that's blessing. Teaching him to love, teaching him to keep his mitzvot. That's not idolatry. That's absolutely the opposite. This is now worship. And hopefully he will stick to it. Mitzvah number 3. You are not to use lightly the name of Adonai your God or take the name in vain, because Adonai will not leave unpunished someone who uses the name in vain. Explain to me how this applies. What does it mean to take His name in vain?
Fluke.
That's the way it's traditionally taught.
To misrepresent.
To misrepresent how?
Saying that you're a representative of Yeshua and then acting your fruits is not right fruits.
Okay, and where do we get that idea, tying it back to what's happening here?
How do we get there?
What's happening here?
Remember, you are a peculiar.
If you have a group of people who don't know God, and you say you're a Christian, and they see how you're acting, and you're not acting in a godly manner, then they're saying, oh, that's the kind of God you're serving, that allows that.
100%.
Through your behavior, you're making.
If you are the bride or you're not representing your husband.
Yeah.
So when we take his name in vain, it's not just using his name as a cuss word, but it's also in the case of, can you imagine people running around? You're sitting at home, she's cutting people off in track, flipping the bird to everybody, stumbling around in the streets, dick drunk, grabs another oakie, says, you're pretty, I'm going to keep you, pets him a few times, and go, what? This Mrs. Bhavna dying. All of a sudden you're involved in her choices because of this becomes a reality. But she's representing your marriage. She's representing that reality, are you not? So now there's this big shift in, it's not just about her behavior, it's actually about the marriage that's going on here. Now if I take his name in vain, I take it and I bring it to nothing, is what he's saying. I have received that reality that I belong to him. I am part of that kingdom. If I bring that to nothing, and I can do that in various ways, not taking seriously what I promised him, not taking seriously my vows, not establishing that covenant, not seeing myself as a peculiar treasure. None of those things can be bringing his name to no value. Instead of telling people you need to cry out to Yeshua to be saved, now all of a sudden I'm saying Yeshua cannot save you because look at my life. Yeshua cannot change you, look at my life. Yeshua doesn't give you peace, look at my life. Yeshua doesn't give you hope.
Are you giving them the opposite impression of what Yeshua is?
Take stock. How long have you guys been believers for?
Do the math.
How many times have we done this?
Not plenty, plenty.
It's time to stop. Because if I really take hold of that idea of who I am, and this is my identity, I need to make sure that I keep it upheld. Your fears, your frustrations, your depressions, your whatever. You're acting like God is not in control. You're acting like He doesn't care about it. You're acting like you fill in a gap. If it's anything that's contrary to His personality, Mazel tov, we have done what we have not set out to do, and that is taking His name in vain. Instead of taking it and upholding it in the way that it should be. Check your reaction before you give it. Fourth one, remember the day Shabbat and set it apart for God, for you have 6 days to labor and do all your work. 6 days is about you, but the seventh day is a Shabbat for Adonai your God. The seventh day is about Him. On it, you are not to do any kind of work, not you, your son, your daughter, your male or female slave or servants, not your livestock, not the foreigner staying with you inside your gates to your property. This is a person who does not know God. He's a foreigner. He's separate from the covenant. You don't get him to work because he's not involved in the covenant.
Doesn't say your wife has to work.
Stop looking for loopholes. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth and the sea, that everything in them, but on the seventh day He rested. This is why Adonai blessed the day, Shabbat, and separated it for Himself. Sabbath is always linked to creation. Everything that He created needs to rest. You have no other play. This is His gift. You be about your business 6 days a week. Do everything you can not to get involved in anything seventh day. This is God's day. Rest, focus. Get that time spent with Him. Set it apart so that it's not just, oh, it's just another Saturday. We all did just another Saturday. We all did just another Friday night. But there's something about this time where God says, I need you to focus. And anything that's in your sphere, people want to come and the guy wants to come and do work here. Not on Shabbat. It's not my Sabbath, it's not his Sabbath. Why am I imposing it on him? How's he going to see what Sabbath really is supposed to be like unless I impose it on him? You do not work. Oh, well, what happens if the guy is a normal Christian and he works on Sundays but his Saturdays are free? You don't work on Shabbat. That becomes something where they need to understand they were created in God's image for that relationship. And it's not worshipping Him on any day you feel like it. It's worshipping Him on the days that He told you to worship Him on. Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath.
Yeah.
What does that mean? You're not here to serve the Sabbath. Sabbath is a gift for you. Yeah, I said to people, and again, it amazes me how we've had a few people that were like serious workaholics, okay? Like they had no reason to work. They had no reason to work, but they would go look for work because they didn't know what to do with themselves if they sat still, type of thing. And they really struggled with the instruction of listen, relax. Right? To take them through this process of you have to let go of what you want to do and focus on God on that day was a level of surrender that they probably weren't used to. But to get them to that place from it's not about me and what I want to do, but it's about God and the way He wants me to do it, change the perception on I need to bring you to this place, and that then affects the family around them. It's a difficult thing to take a stand for stuff like this because as with every mitzvah you will read, you will realize that it is countercultural. What do I mean by that? The world will say, don't wear funny tassels on your pants, you look strange. God will say, put tassels on your pants. God will say, or the world will say, you can worship God any way you want to.
And any way you want.
And any way you want to. And God will say you will do it at this time, at that place, in this manner. It is completely contrary to the norm, which makes it all the more difficult when you make the decision yourself. But the beauty of it, remember, in 19, you're a peculiar treasure. If I can be that and a kingdom of priests, if I just listen and hold fast to, Shabbat becomes a testimony to those around you that God rested on this day. Understand, all of creation needs to rest. Hello.
Hello.
Mm-hmm. So we got to go through this process of, again, with looking at these mitzvahs. I do not want you to make this mistake. I don't want you to think about what this mitzvah means to me. Here's an example. Let's use tzitzit for an example. What are people going to think about me? What are they going to say when I have it? Am I going to give the right answer if I wear them? Then I'm focusing on my responses and what I'm going to say and who I am instead of focusing on how does God see this mitzvah being fulfilled. If I focus on Him and the fact that He gave me an instruction, then I focus on His response to me. So instead of me focusing on the way, Auntie Angie's going to think I'm weird. What will God think of me if I do this? Changes the perspective. Is it pleasing to Him? Am I bringing a smile to His face? And if I'm doing that and it's bringing joy to him, then man, why would I hold back on any of that reality? Okay. Honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land which Adonai your God is giving you. It's an interesting, if you do this, then you will live longer. Why?
She will live in the God's favor.
Why?
Because she honored him.
You're honoring your parents hopefully because they honored him before you, and then by honoring your parents, you are going to fall in line with God. Train your child in which he will go, and he will not depart from it. You see, it's a double way thing. So if I look at my parents, and hopefully you had a God-fearing reality, a lot of us have not. So we have to become that rung of, this is what it looks like. Okay? But if you have, and you honored your parents in the sense of you honored God, you stuck to it, you've been through things, you understand things, there's a sense of spiritual maturity that comes with that will help me make my decisions and be able to trust them with the input that they give me. Hopefully that is going to push me back into the text and push me back into faith. Okay? Do not murder. What's the difference between manslaughter and murder according to Torah?
Manslaughter.
Yes. One is there is a whole bunch of hate in my heart, I'm waiting for an opportunity, and the other one is I'm swinging my axe and the axe head flies off, and then all of a sudden we don't have Johnny anymore. Right? Both carry consequences. One, if it's premeditated and I'm found guilty, death. Other one, I have to run and I have to go live out my days in the Levitical city until the high priest dies. I'm not allowed to come back. Both carry consequences. Even though it was accidental, I have to leave my town, I have to leave my home, I have to go and I have to stay there so that I do not distress or cause the family members to stumble in their grief and their anger.
Put that in a modern sense, if I were to accidentally run someone over and I kill them, do I need to skip town?
We don't have a Levitical city, so it doesn't really apply.
Okay.
You don't dronk to in his blood.
But it's still very difficult. Because when people see you walking around, they're going to be, that's the guy.
That's the guy who killed them.
And that's a difficult trauma to help them deal with, as well as you're looking across and you go, that's the guy's family. You understand what God is trying to protect us from, that entire anguish reality. Okay? But yeah, do not murder, very specific. It doesn't say do not kill. So many people that are against anything biblical will say God says do not kill, and yet Joshua is busy slaughtering people and David slaughtering people and all the rest of it. Therefore, the Bible contradicts itself. It's very specific in the Hebrew, that's not the case. Make sense? Do not commit adultery. I want you to plant in your mind, idolatry and adultery is the same thing. One is physical, one is spiritual. If you start worshipping and bowing down to other deities, you are cheating on God in your marriage. That's adultery. If anything becomes more important in your marriage, it's as good as cheating. If you look at another person with lust in your heart, you look at another thing. If something takes the place of your spouse, we have problems. If something takes the place of your God, it's the same thing. Do not steal. How do you love your neighbor if you're stealing his stuff? Do not give false evidence against your neighbor. Do not covet your neighbor's house. Do not covet your neighbor's wife, his male or female slave, his ox, his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Simple reality. If you're focusing on what he has and what you don't, you're telling God what you have is not good enough. You want me to say that again slowly? If I'm so busy focusing on Andres Bucky and not focusing on my fortuna, then I'm saying the car that God gave me is not good enough. It applies in all aspects of that reality. My house is too small.
It's kind of like the
You have-
Joneses next door has got a new car. Like, we need a new car. The Joneses got a new fridge. We need a new fridge.
Yeah. And that provision that God gave you is now, is this all I have? It was better in Egypt. You understand where this leads?
It's big onions.
Okay. I'm going to stop here. We've got two parallels where Yeshua says the greatest commandment is Shema Israel. Hear and listen, O Israel, the Lord is God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. In a way a rabbi would explain it, he's just explained the first 4 commandments. Love God, keep his commandments. In act of worship, you have to worry about your relationship with God or the first 4. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Instructions from 5 to 10. Get summarized in those 2 things. And he says all of the Torah and the prophets hang upon that reality. You want to talk about covenant? Love God, love me. Love your neighbor. And we have that. This is how it fits together. Okay? They hook together. You cannot do one without the other. You shouldn't. We, unfortunately, have the reality of which we try to do. Some people walk into congregation with the love of the Lord and they hate the people in the room. Some people walk into congregation, they love the people, and they're only there for the people because they're angry at God for something He didn't give them or did to them. Lots of people are really good at doing one of these and not very focused on doing both. To love God, then if I have love for Him, I will love my neighbor easier. Just like me loving my spouse and loving my children and loving the people around me, if I'm in tune with God, it makes it easier. Now, okay, so what have you got to do for me for next week? The different names of Jethro and
then other thingy. Soos jy dit neergeskryf.
I was
Ek het
here.
Jethro se neergeskryf.
En toe skryf jy daai ander dingetjie ook weer weggegaan.
Oh, what does the third day mean to God?
Yes.
okay, the third day realities. That's a separate study. I wouldn't worry too much about that just yet.
So that's not official I work,
No.
that's personal study.
Okay, so gooi is the real one.
Jethro?
I want you to look at the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And I want you to parallel it with the 10 Commandments.
Nice. That sounds interesting.
Saam nog
Oh, there's going to be some revelations coming out there. I can feel it.
This,
We gaan opsoek.
But James, why are you smiling like you just got 50,000 rand? You know what I'm talking about.
right. This is something we have spoken about before.
What did you say? With parallel it to?
The 10 Commandments. I'll give you the first one. Right? If I look at the Lord's Prayer, it starts with Our Father. What's the first one? I am Adonai your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt.
I am.
So you can take those two and you can put them together. Who art in heaven, you need to look for the next one. Where does he talk about heaven? Do not make for yourself any carven image in heaven above or on earth below. So heaven and heaven come and they cross-reference. Now you take that and you do that with the next date. Okay.
Okay, stop now.
Ons gaan aangaan.
Yeah.
3 out of 10.
All right. And while you're doing that, just while you're doing that,
Here we go.
when you're numbering 1 to 10, I want you to use from Aleph to Yud. Eh? I think it is Aleph to Yud. So your first mitzvah will be Aleph, then Bet, then. Okay. So and then you can look at what does the Aleph have to do with I'm the Lord your God. Right? It starts with our Father. He is our first. You start to see a pattern. I want you to chase those hamsters.
I was always the beginning.
Yeah.
Find those answers up, says that.
Hamster pie.
Father, we just want to thank you again for this time, for this family, Father. I thank you that we can just sit here together, Father, and you can teach us and help us grow. And Father, that as you prepare us for what's coming, we just want to thank you. Thank you for meeting us at where we are, at our need, Father. And I just pray that you would help us make the right decisions, help us to better reflect you, help us to lift up your name. Father, and we just thank you for the privilege of being called yours, a peculiar treasure, Father, a kingdom of priests. Help us to hold fast to your truths and reflect them, Father, so the world may know your love and how good you are. We thank you for your blessings. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen.